What's up, rockers? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Instagram at talklouder_podcast. And of course, our website, talklouderpodcast.com, where you'll find links to our merch and all of our previous episodes. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And today we're joined by an old friend, a guy I met at South by Southwest in 2005. And for him, South by Southwest is a long way from home because he is Canadian. We've got Sean Kelly on the show today. Sean, possibly best known as the frontman for his band Crash Kelly, but he's done so many other things. He's played with Helix. He's played with Coney Hatch. He plays with Lee Aaron, the metal queen. He plays with pop star Nelly Furtado, and he is also an accomplished author. He is here today to talk about his second book. It's called Don't Call It Hair Metal. It's an awesome read, and we get into sort of the inspiration behind the book. He tells us that he sort of started the book with the intent of defending hair metal, and then at some point, a switch went off and he decided to, rather than defend it, just sort of educate people about it and talk about some of the musicality that goes into this genre that's been sort of referred to with this derogatory tag, hair metal. And he does a great job of sort of analyzing the bands and the music. He interviews a bunch of musicians, including our own Jason McMaster. He interviews Rudy Sarzo, Vivian Campbell, Dee Snider. So a lot of input from people other than himself. And it was a great read. I really enjoyed it. It was real easy to read. And as someone who, kind of grew up with that era of music being very dominant in my life, I could relate to it all. So
I like how he was kind of breaking things down for people on styles. Maybe he went into some certain songs, like for examples, but I like how he sort of would take the band's sound and break it down as to what's really happening when the singer does this and the guitar player does this. Yeah. And this is all pertaining under the banner "Don't Call It Hair Metal" as to why, these guys sound this way, because it's more like because of where they're from, that they're a product of their environment, and not just, they didn't wait for MTV to blow up and have a bunch of hair metal bands in order to become this. He also talks about how Rudy Sarzo is corrective of him when he's talking about Metal Health and Quiet Riot's, #1 smash hit. Because he talks about how Rudy corrected him and said, we're from the 70s. Don't forget it. We are 10, 15, 20 years prior to someone coming up with a term derogatory, probably, arguably, hair metal. So we know how each other played, so we wrote songs that way. And then we just thought we were calling it rock and roll. Next thing you know, a few years later, someone's calling it this certain thing. So there's all of this sort of aspect and vision and, like you said, knowledge that people don't realize is not being realized by just a radio DJ or even on old people who used to tape videos, used to tape Headbangers Ball, and the VJ is just carelessly calling AC/DC a hair metal band or whatever. Maybe that happened, maybe it didn't happen, but we talk about these things and we get into it today with Sean. I just want to say he's probably one of the busiest rock musicians and still has time to write 2 going on 3 books.
Yes.
Be a dad and be this guy and pay mortgage and
survive. Yeah.
He's like a Superman kind of thing. Hyper intelligent. I know that sounds like I'm calling him a name. I wish people would call me hyper intelligent, because I am not that. This guy is truly just all guns blazing, all gears are clean. And he just, I really like the guy a lot. I've had the honor of sharing the stage with him worldwide. I've done festivals overseas with either Crash Kelly, or like I was just on the cruise where he was playing with Lee Aaron. So it's kind of important to me that we got to talk to him, and specific to his new book, Don't Call It Hair Metal. We also find out some cool information about something that is coming out that is, I'll just call it as he did, a companion to the book. And I think that anyone who gets the book will be excited to hear about what is in store for, people who have the book should probably also get this other item too.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Dave, for setting that up.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a super sweet guy. I liked him the minute I met him. I got to give a shout out to Chris Case, who was his manager or publicist during the South by Southwest days. He might have been both, but I remember this guy from Canada named Chris Case reaching out to me saying, you got to see this band Crash Kelly. And so I went and I saw him and I loved him. And if you're into, Thin Lizzy, Cheap Trick, early Aerosmith, Crash Kelly is going to be something you want to check out. They're sort of in that same style of music. But I really enjoyed the fact that in this book, hair metal is often just sort of dismissed as all show and no substance. And I think this might be the first time I've read someone that actually articulates some of the layers that go beyond the MTV videos and the glossy album covers and breaks it down. And it makes sense that a musician would do that because he has that insight to bring to the table as well. But he does a really good, educated, articulate job of explaining why there is more to quote unquote hair metal than meets the eye. So
I can't think of a more perfect guy to actually do it, because he's a musician. He lived it. He fell in love with the music at the time that it was a trend and highly popular. And I fully enjoyed hanging out with him. Sean Kelly and his book, Don't Call It Hair Metal, today on the Talk Louder podcast. How's life?
Oh, life's good. Life's good. Dave.
Sean, what's happening, buddy?
How are you?
I'm good, man. I haven't seen you, and I was trying to do the homework, and I think it was South by Southwest 2005.
Hard to believe, eh?
I know.
Wow.
Yeah, I have a photo of me and you at Stubbs during South by. I think we were watching the much anticipated return of the New York Dolls.
That's right. I remember it. I remember it clearly. That was exciting.
Yeah, that was fun.
Sean, we just hang out and record it.
Yeah, man. Perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So, obviously, if I haven't seen you since 2005, there's a lot to catch up on, but we won't try to compile all that into a single episode. You obviously are an accomplished musician, and we want to get into all that, but the main reason we wanted to talk to you today is about this awesome new book that you just released called Don't Call It Hair Metal. Art in the Excess of 80s Rock. This is your second book, and we'll get into your first book, Metal on Ice, in just a bit. But let's talk about.
To be honest, I don't think I knew about the first book.
Yeah, we did. We did a whole show on Canadian rock bands, Canadian metal bands.
Yeah.
For those of you listening and watching, you can go back through our archives and look that one up. We covered all the greats, much like Sean did in his book, Metal on Ice. What I liked about it was the fact that you spent a lot of time on some of the unsung heroes, the Killer Dwarfs, the Helix, the Honeymoon Suite, Kim Webster, and stuff that
Kim Mitchell.
Kim Mitchell. I'm sorry. Max Webster.
Love Max Webster. Yeah,
there we go.
You're on the right track.
I'm putting them together.
You had a contract word there.
Yeah, I created a hybrid. I created my own Canadian metal band.
I like that. Yeah, you did.
But we'll come back to that in just a moment. But yeah, this is Sean's second book. Don't call it hair metal. And so I read in the intro of the book that you wanted to write a book about. You almost wanted to defend the genre that's rightfully or wrongly known as hair metal. And then you kind of stepped back and decided not to take such a defensive position. So tell me about that change in direction there.
Well, yeah, I think at first I had my backup after years of defending 80s rock and roll, what I call rock and roll music that happened to take place in the 80s.
Yes.
Okay. And many times in my professional career, I've seen a bias against ideas that may have been inspired by 80s bands. For example, if I'm on a session and I bring in a riff and someone says, "Oh, that's cool." Yeah. And I say, "Yeah, it reminds me of Cinderella." That would be often met with derision. Whereas if I said, "Oh, the same riff was inspired by Aerosmith," as long as it was Rock's era Aerosmith, that would be cool.
Right.
You know, like that seemed to, even though the idea would have been the same, even a mention of it could cause a bias against what I was bringing to the table. And I think that's because for so many people, these artists are like a moment frozen in time. They saw an album cover and that's it. They never went any deeper than that. Now, part of that's because of the cultural zeitgeist that was happening in the 80s. Sure, image was important, and with the dawn of MTV and the importance that you know, the role that played in helping bring music to the masses, I get it. But I've followed this music fervently since I was 10 years old, and I still follow it. I follow the artists who created it, and I see that they're still creating great music. So I felt the need to at least bring that up. But early on, I realized it's pointless, because what you end up doing is you end up alienating people. And I actually don't look at music as a way of alienating people. I look at music as a way of bringing people together.
Yeah.
So I thought the best way to do that is just to share what I loved about it and maybe draw some parallels between what some people really liked and say, look, it's not that big of a stretch between Elvis Costello and Enough's Enough. If you have a little faith in me, I'm going to show you. Maybe I can show you. And if you don't buy it at the end, well, at least I tried. But really, I just wanted to trace the sonic evolution of the music through that decade and beyond. And also the artistic intention behind the people, because really I'm into music for the people. I do this for friendship and I do this for fellowship. And that's what I've taken away as the great reward from my music career was friends.
Amen.
That I can talk to you guys after almost 20 years of working together, seeing each other, and we can be friendly and have conversations and feel like close, even though we haven't been close enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Your words make me so happy just to hear you lay it on the line like that. No pun intended. But the ideas behind this, quotes, don't call it hair metal, it really strike a nerve, many nerves actually, with me, because you've already mentioned Aerosmith. Okay, if someone were to just kind of bash, use hair metal as a term, whether, just as a term, I'm not saying they love it or hate it, but they would include bands like AC/DC and Aerosmith, like you mentioned Aerosmith, in this box that said hair metal written on it. If they had a CD collection or an album collection, they would say, or like you're in a current record store, and a record store that's open right now, you would go to a hair metal section. Would Aerosmith and AC/DC be, would Motorhead be in that? You see what I'm trying to say? That hurts my feelings when it really shouldn't. But to understand why it would hurt my feelings as to why someone would just be lazy enough to not just say, yeah, we sell rock and roll and all kinds of music, and Motorhead's under rock and roll, just like Hanoi Rocks.
Yeah, man. Well, I think that's it, right? Like, really, the best of all of that music should be part of the tapestry, the overarching story of rock and roll, right? And it's often not. It's glossed over, something other or lesser than. And it's not fair, and it's not right, and it's not educated. It's actually not a reasonable thing to say if you haven't done the research. And we've all lived the research here. So
Yeah.
I think we're going to share some of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's also okay. I just want to get off my fucking soapbox here. but it's also okay for people to want to like the term, to be okay with calling it hair metal if they fucking want to.
Sure.
Because they have invested their heartstrings and their money and their lives to being a fan of such a thing. The thing is they have within their hair metal collection, they've got every Metallica album.
Exactly.
See what I'm saying? But they want to call it hair metal. I think that 80s metal might be only slightly better term than hair metal because it takes the hair off of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I did an interview one time with Nikki Sixx, and he said something that has stuck with me for a long time. And he said, I don't want to be remembered as a hair band. When you look at bands like Metallica and U2, nobody remembers them as 80s rock or
right.
80s bands or whatever.
Right.
They've kind of transcended everything, and they're not identified by a decade. They are what they are. And I think the point he was trying to make was that's something to strive for. But I thought it was interesting. And so is the title of your book. And to speak to what Jason was just saying, it's almost as if hair metal and 80s rock have become sort of interchangeable when that's not really the case at all, because you can look at a Metallica and an Iron Maiden, bands that, hit their stride in the 80s, but nobody considers them 80s, and they certainly don't consider them hair metal. So it's almost like it's this subgenre of music that just happened in the 80s. And somehow, for some reason, it's become almost derogatory.
Well, that's it. I think the genesis of the term was derogatory. It was kind of a facile term to kind of lump all kind of 80s commercial rock or the commercial rock of the 80s, because hard rock was at one point the predominant pop music,
yes.
in the 80s. And I think that's what happened when bands like Nirvana came along. It was a reaction against what had become a very refined and corporate look. Like, I mean, that has as much to do, though, with the corporatization of record companies and conglomerations, where you brought in people who weren't necessarily music lovers, but bean counters. Hey, we got to sell X amount. We got shareholders. What's selling? The W, Whitesnake, Winger, Warren. I need a W. And I need someone who looks like this. And we're going to use this producer and this clothing designer. And we're going to use this video director. And we're going to pop it out. And one of them is going to hit.
Yeah.
And I think that did happen. And to be fair, maybe they lost some of the soul. But even within those bands, there were talented individuals and people with dreams and people with ambition and people whose heart was in the right place, and they were just trying to get their art across, right?
Yeah. You made a point in the book, I believe it was in the book, where you made this point where you were saying that a lot of this so-called hair metal or 80s rock gets marginalized and discounted or whatever. But in fact, a lot of especially in hard rock and metal, the guitar players were sort of, rising to the top and showing off some technical proficiency that hadn't really been seen on a wide scale. So I think the point you were making was you can't just dismiss this as talentless bubblegum. There's a lot of great musicianship going on here, and it was particularly evident with the lead guitar players.
Yeah, well, even, beyond the obvious technical proficiency, what stuck out to me from doing the book when I talked to guys like Warren DeMartini and George Lynch was the affection for Jimi Hendrix and what the role that they were looking at themselves, and Jake E. Lee too, as extensions of what Hendrix was doing, which is so funny. I always thought of them as like post Van Halen or post Randy Rhoads.
Sure.
But these guys are 10 years older than me. They're coming from a 70s place. And when I went back and listened, I realized it was this brightness of tone, this adventurousness. What they were doing was not necessarily, I mean, I guess you could make an argument that later on, some people did make it about gymnastics, but it was actually about a search for tone and adventurousness, adventurous phrasing. And that to me is what I find so exciting. I often have this argument where people say, well, I like Elliot Easton because Elliot Easton makes solos you can sing. And I agree. I love Elliot Easton. But try singing a John Coltrane solo. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily always about an easily singable or hummable melody. It's about phrasing and rhythm and texture. And that's what guys like DeMartini and Lynch and Jakey Lee were bringing to the table for me. Eddie Van Halen, the same thing in many cases. So I think that
could have been like a saxophone solo. It wouldn't have to fit, the no disrespect to Eddie and Twisted Sister, but his solos are not like that in my opinion. No.
They're more like a Leslie West type thing. Where
they are, aren't they?
Yeah. And I got that. Dee
Yeah.
Snider told me that. He goes, it was Leslie West. We were listening. It was that Long Island thing, where it's like heavy blues, but with melodies, thematic, right? Which is also wonderful,
Valuable, very valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that jumped out at me in the book, a point you made, and I thought this was really interesting, is you could argue, an argument could be made that Van Halen almost sort of created the whole hair metal genre, and yet they escaped the derision of the tag. So somehow they became the poster boys and the band that everybody imitated, but they never were categorized or dismissed as hair metal. So how do you explain that? Because I thought it was a great point.
To me, it's almost like they were a combination of walking art installation and conquering Viking. Like it was just this other thing. Like, I mean, you've just got the story of the two immigrant brothers who are just so closely joined because, they have to do this to protect themselves. So they develop this bond that turns into a musical bond. You have this bass player who's got a tenor like a trumpet, who just adds this vocal blend. This singer who's like out of vaudeville meets Jim Dandy from Black Oak, Arkansas. The mashup is so bizarre. The personality is so strong. To me, it just ran like a parallel course with what they were influencing because you couldn't create it. You couldn't make that up in a boardroom. You know what I mean? Right. It was just the combination. And also, I think with Van Halen, they did it all with a smile on their face.
Yes.
Humor, joy. There was joy there. Like they never looked happy. They might have been hating each other backstage, but the joy was there when they were playing live.
Yeah. The tongue in cheek is there the entire time. That the like you said, they're smiling and they almost look like the Beatles. When they're smiling and they look very uniform, but very there's something unique about each individual. And I couldn't have said it better talking about Van Halen here. The idea that they were smiling and were trying to get the party started, but the riffs being like the music that was coming off the stage while these guys are doing like cheerleader moves.
Yeah.
And
it's true. They are.
Yeah, but you have a song like Atomic Punk that's just mowing your brain cell, and like and what their agenda is not what their smiling faces and rah 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 go team cheerleader kicks and flying through the air, and they look like happy ice skaters wearing hot pink and yay, you know what I mean? But not. So it's like they were definite wolves in sheep's clothing, which is kind of like where I think when, like I mentioned Hanoi Rocks, that's like a sleaze. That's dirtier than Van Halen ever looked to me. So that's where sleaze and I feel like your book kind of, goes a couple of different ways when it talks about the difference between, I don't know, a Motley Crue versus like a Hanoi Rocks, because it's not the same. They're not doing the same thing. Although, you know, the closest thing I feel like Hanoi Rocks might have lent itself to without even knowing they were nodding, they were letting, you know, people, they were getting nods left and right, is when Guns N' Roses, or could even say Hollywood Rose, came out and were looking dirtier and sleazier than even a Motley Crue, which for a second, if you squint, they look uniform too, like Kiss or something. And Van Halen was kind of like you said, their own thing. And I feel like the clothes they wore, other than Roth, maybe the clothes they just wore those were the clothes they wore on stage. And it was the time. It was like the mid 70s and late 70s, just look that they had. I mean, I don't think Roth was walking around without a shirt on and wearing, you know, fringy, tight spandex pants and that barely covered his, you know, pubic hair.
Wouldn't put it past him.
But, right. You never know, right? You never know. But I feel like when those guys were coming out, I'm so glad you brought up Van Halen, because when those guys were coming out, 80s metal it was pre their proto glam, their proto American. I mean, sure, Aerosmith had already been there and were already doing their own thing, and might have even, now that I think about it, had that sleaze thing going, that dirtier thing, you know, happening. Yeah. I don't want to mention drugs, but that was, after a while, you know, some people might have even called a genre of music heroin rock, you know, or junkie rock or whatever. But I really, you know, whether they were on dope or not, I got that. I get that when they're describing that. I would hate for people to just know me as, oh yeah, he's in this heroin rock band. You know, I get that, but that sounds derogatory again. I wouldn't want that to define a genre of music, just like I don't want hair metal to define a genre of music when it's just rock and roll. So
it's just rock and roll. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to put the yogurt somewhere in the supermarket, right? Like, I do get it. And we do categorize things. This is what we do, right? And that's okay. I think it's just when it's used as a blanket term, that to kind of, like, I mean, you can't encompass Dawkins and Cinderella or Dangerous Toys or Sea Hags or Hanoi Rocks. There's a lot of different stuff going on there, and they're different nuts and bolts.
I think that I just want to say it's fucking lazy.
Lazy.
It's lazy.
Categories always are, but we're a fast-paced, no attention span, and it's even worse today than it's ever been. And this has been going on for decades.
Sure,
but people always need to put something in a quick box just so they can, you know, quickly make their point, and they don't spend a lot of time with the nuances.
Well, they did it with calling this new batch of rock and roll grunge too. The same fucking thing happened. It's like, what if I don't want my band to be categorized as this thing called grunge?
Yeah,
which I think is derived from like garage rock and punk rock and some kind of pop music, because I like Nirvana, but they'll tell you themselves that they were more ripping off Kiss and Cheap Trick than anyone else on their street.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Wait, okay, well, let's back up. I thought they were a grunge band. Listen to the guys in the band talk about it. So the feeling is probably somewhat mutual, might be some gray area. Surely there's a lot of quote grunge bands that were like, grunge? I'm just playing rock and roll.
Well, think about Stone Temple Pilots, how ridiculous it is to categorize them as a grunge band. When really, like, it's like Bowie, it's a Cheap Trick, it's
Aerosmith,
Zeppelin, Aerosmith,
it's fashionable and stylish. It's not it's not this woe is me depressive, shall I say, heroin rock.
Yeah.
So
when I knew we were going to have this conversation today, I started thinking about the term hair metal, and it easily jumps out as maybe the most convenient and also most derogatory, if that might be a strong word, but it is a genre of music that's been tagged with a very strong label. And I started thinking, are there other genres of music that have suffered that same fate? And I got to thinking, and in modern times, more modern times anyway, I came up with, you've got bro country and you've got jock rock.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, I mean, hair metal is no longer an exclusive club. There are genres of music that get lumped into a derogatory category. I bet the bro country dudes don't appreciate being called bro country.
No, and there's also a term I've heard that was basically like around the late 90s and early 2000s, pretty much maybe a little bit further back, is bro metal.
Bro metal. Wow.
That's kind of where I was going with jock rock. It's the Limp Bizkits and the
bro metal.
Yeah. So we're not alone. Those of us.
That's true.
Yeah. Ugly, man.
Tell me about you in the book, Sean. You have input. This is great. I mean, you had Rudy Sarzo participate in the book, Warren DeMartini, Dee Snider, Vivian Campbell, our own Jason McMaster. Was there anybody that you wanted to get to speak in your book that you couldn't get?
Yeah, Tom Kiefer would have been absolutely brilliant to talk to, because to me, he represents exactly what I've been trying to say: the diversity and the talent, and someone who's developed and went, the opposite. Like, even the first Cinderella record feels more like an old Aerosmith record than anything else, with a little bit of Judas Priest maybe in there, with a little bit of a nod to the metal that was happening. But then they moved more into Americana. It became a broadening of the instrument palette. You've got dobros and banjos and mouth harp. You've got this. When they did a ballad, it was more dynamic. It seemed like there was more going on. Like they would get John Paul Jones to come in and do the string arrangements on a ballad. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't about synthesizer pads. It was about creating organic sounds. And I thought it would have been brilliant. And I came close. I had his publicist kind of going back and forth. And I don't know why we couldn't connect. He's probably just a busy guy. But I would love to speak with him anyway. I actually did an episode of a show called The Contrarians with Martin Popoff. And we talked a lot about Heartbreak Station. And I just said, like, that's such a wonderful, that's like, to me, that if I wanted to explain American roots music to somebody, I'd say, check out that record. Like, everything, right up to the 50s, right up to Chuck Berry. It's all in a Little Richard.
I feel like Canadians, Bryan Adams could have covered Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone. And no one would have even known that he didn't even write it.
That's a great point. Wow.
I can just hear Bryan Adams singing that song, doing his take with tellies and leather jackets and cool Elvis hair and just being Bryan Adams, but singing that song. I think it would totally translate. So that says a lot about his pops. I'm talking about Tom now. His pop sensibility on top of his love for Stones and Aerosmith and just Bob Dylan and good old storytelling and Americana theme. You know what I mean? Last Train Home kind of shit. I'm standing in line at the bus station and writing a song about me standing in line at the bus station. Real shit, real shit. I think Tom could, in your book, could have his own chapter about, and this is, I can't wait to say this part. What is up with their clothing on Night Song's album cover? And then you hear the record and it doesn't, wait a minute. And what's up with the band name, the look they have? And then you hear the record and it ties in with exactly what you've already said in the past 5 minutes. But when I think about that, I mean, the song, the title track is my favorite song. And it's so heavy and fucking dark. And I mean, that's like a satanic hurdy-gurdy going on.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh my God, something's about to fucking break.
Something bad's going on.
A spell is being cast right now. So, and it's called Night Songs. It even sounds like a horror film or something.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
Oh, what the hell is the witchcraft that is that song, especially, and the things that are happening here? And they're wearing boas with, Aquanet. And I'm like, hold on, who made them do? Were they at gunpoint when they made this album cover? Who made them did Bon Jovi name the band and go, yeah, you need to call yourself Cinderella? I'm like, what is going on here? Because you're hitting it on the fucking head, Sean, when you say after that, it turned into just a little dirtier, and the look they had was just like, I might have some leather pants and just a t-shirt and some cowboy boots on, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was less glam, less hair metal, and very much just good fucking rock and roll songwriting with balladeering themes.
Well, isn't it funny that the band that probably has least of the musical qualities that people often associate with hair metal have the absolute definitive image of a hair metal band on that album cover? Like, it looks like a petting zoo assaulted a neon sign and it just all went wrong.
Right.
Like, it really is something else. But having said all that, that purple stood out to me. I do have a memory of walking into a record store and going, cool. So I do remember that. And I had the same with Poison. Yeah. With Poison too. There was something about the outright androgyny, like of it, that just, hey, there's something that's gonna make my parents mad, or that's not what everyone else is doing. Even though I guess it was what everyone else was doing at a certain extent. But when I saw that, it felt rebellious. It felt dangerous. It felt alluring. And, in my kind of bucolic, Northern Ontario upbringing, it felt exciting, and I think that's, much like where before it used to be, you'd throw on an Elvis record or a Buddy Holly record, you'd feel excited. Now you get to feel excited after you saw the thing that made you feel excited. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you were getting a kind of a double dose. And then once people realized the power of that, I think you saw an abuse of that later on. And then all of a sudden it's like, bigger.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned Tom Kiefer because, man, you talk about that guy is the embodiment of what we're talking about here. He is a guy, like you said, you saw one look at that album cover, boom, immediately. I mean, the term hair metal could have been invented right then and there. And then he turned into something. He didn't turn into something. He already was something that's far beyond that. So he would have been, I could see why you really wanted him in the book, because he could speak to both sides of the equation here. Who else did you reach out to that you really wanted their opinion?
I'm trying to think of who else. I would have loved to have spoken with Jake E. Lee, because then I would have had the holy trinity of post Van Halen LA guitar heroes. You know what I mean? I would have had, because that's such a fascinating situation. It's much like the Clapton, Page, and Beck thing, where these guys live so close to each other in like rural England, and yet they would go to school and they talk to each other and show up at their houses playing guitar, and they changed the world, literally changed the world. And like these three guys. And to me, it was very much like that. That was the feeling I got. And when I listen back to Warren and to George and Jake, it's amazing how they were influencing each other in real time. Like, George told me about Warren coming over to help him prepare for the Ozzy audition, because Warren had a bootleg of Believer, of a live bootleg. And he'd say, oh, I went to see him. I was 18 rows back. I think Randy plays it up here. Like, so that's the way the information's being disseminated. Yeah. It's not like going on YouTube and getting an open note. You're interpreting it. And they're interpreting it through two prisms. The prism of watching it in a kind of flawed way, but then also the prism of two talented people figuring it out together. Like, that's exciting. And Jake's living with Warren, and Warren's got long fingers. Hey, man, I can play this lick. So Jake goes, well, if I put my thumb here and I do that, I can do it too. Oh, I just invented something. And they're doing that all the time. Yeah. And at one point, George told me he joined Rat for a week and Warren joined Dawkins. because they were across from each other. They just got sick of each other's bands. Like, this is mind blowing to me. Like, how can this be happening?
Yeah.
So that kind of information, I just went back and listened, and then to hear the influence, like Uli John Roth, like Warren DeMartini getting Uli John Roth's phone number and phoning him in Germany, and his mom getting mad about the long distance charge. It's like unbelievable.
Wow.
But you can hear it, and you can hear the intention. Like, I'm going to play Sails of Charon, but I'm going to do it on a pop tune. And incredible.
Yeah.
That's mind blowing.
You mentioned Cinderella, and I'll throw in Tesla. What other band of that era gets unfairly labeled hair metal?
Oh man, I think there's a couple. Like, I mean, I would say, and this is dicey because I've got the singer sitting here. You can spank me if I'm out of line, but I've heard Dangerous Toys labeled as hair metal, but to me, it's absolutely Southern fried boogie rock with intensity and precision and dry, no bullshit tone. Like, it's in your face. Jason's singing like that with intention. Scott's playing like that with this dry but meaty tone. Like, it actually sounds like the environment they're coming from, or at least what I imagine, and it swings. Like, it's got the element of swing. It's not like it's moving, and it moved me. So that to me was a prime example. And I talked with you about this, Jason. But like, how I listened to that and went, that guy's the bravest guitarist I ever heard. Like, it was like him and Mick Sweeta. Like, they're playing these great, aggressive, technically challenging and highly musical licks, but they're hooks, you know what I mean? And they're doing it without all the delays and effects on it. It's just happening right in your face. So I thought that, you could say Dangerous. I thought there was a band called Company of Wolves.
I remember that.
Yeah, I just bought their album on vinyl. I mean, it's roots rock with the odd foray into a whammy bar. Once in a while, a whammy bar appears, but really, it's American roots rock. So I think that there are quite a few bands like that. Tesla is a great example.
Yeah.
Do you think that Twisted Sister would be able to fight their way out of the argument? I mean, because the makeup and it's bombastic, but I think that it's not as much clown show as people have, sort of like put them into, because they're more like a glossy Motorhead.
Totally. To me, it's more like Dictators or something. Like, it's coming out of that New York. Yeah, very much a punk rock thing.
Yes.
But with also like where they were coming from with that, what Dee told me, like Dee and JJ went to go see an off-Broadway production of Rocky Horror Picture. He said, I can't tell you how influential that was. Wow. And that's that 50s thing. 50s rock was a big thing too, right? The doo-wop thing, the sha-na-na thing. So you've got 50s rock, punk rock, but also this kind of the steel-fisted thing of early Judas Priest and Motorhead, like you said, working with Pete Way from UFO, like live. Like, I mean, I've played with Dee. It's scary to be on stage with Dee Snider. It's an intensity. First time I ever played with him, I didn't know he was coming on. I just felt something shooting up my spine. And then this thing ran by me, and my monitors were blowing up, and my head was exploding, and my heart was racing. I'm going, this is the most ferocious thing I've ever felt in my life. And
you lucky man, you.
Dude, oh, so lucky. But this is at a rehearsal for a Christmas musical. This is at rehearsal. He's like that in the morning. Like that's nice. The first thing he does. Wait till you get to nighttime. Like it's a whole other thing. But yeah, you know what? They get lumped in with that, and there was an effort to capture that, make it radio friendly. They had the image, which was far more Looney Tunes though and Animal House than it was trying to pander to some perverted sexuality thing or something. It was fun.
I think their personalities lent to what you just described.
Yeah,
the Animal House and the Looney Tunes and crazy, like this crazy stuff. Their videos were like that.
I was just going to say,
all their videos were like that.
I think the videos, more so than anything, is what put them in that box, because they were sort of a Motorhead type street biker band. And then, of course, they changed their image with Stay Hungry, but that image probably wouldn't have been broadcast nearly as much without MTV. And I think there might not be another band from the quote unquote hair metal era that became synonymous with the label as Twisted Sister because of their videos. They were in your living room 24/7. The videos, the characters, the guys in the band were larger than life. The hair is huge. The colors are loud, and they were in your face nonstop. So I think if you'd taken Twisted Sister and they never made an appearance on MTV, they might not be in this discussion that we're having. They might be more of an underground band like a Hanoi Rocks or something, but they were all over. They were as popular as McDonald's. They were everywhere.
Do you think that, I mean, I think I know the answer, but it didn't hurt them, but do you think that it hurt them by way of what we're talking about?
You'd have to ask the guys in the band. I think it was, I would have done it. I don't think Dee would have made a video that he didn't want to make. Right. And I think it goes back to what you said. You made a great point a minute ago, Jason, where you said those videos are reflections of the personalities within the band. Because, I mean, Sean here knows Dee better than us, but we were talking to Eddie Ojeda at the Rockin' Pod. I've interviewed Dee before. They definitely have a sense of humor about them, and you could tell that they love Animal House. They can probably quote Animal House and Mad Magazine and Looney Tunes and all that stuff. So, I think they would have made those videos anyway. I just think the timing was everything. Mm-hmm. MTV was looking for visual artists. They didn't get much more visual than Twisted Sister, and boom, there you go. It's an image they'll never live down, for better or worse.
I'm sorry we're talking over you, Sean, but I want to bring up things that you've said as well. Like you mentioned like swing, and of course you were talking about my band for a second, but but Ace of Spades swings.
Absolutely.
It's slimy, you know what I mean? You can like shimmy to that.
Yeah.
Right? Like Overkill, Motorhead has that. The song Overkill, the song Ace of Spades, it has that shimmy, it has that swing. Well, you got to think about, let's go Twisted Sister. You think about Can't Stop Rock and Roll. Mm-hmm. That's swing, man. You could do you could tap dance to that. You could do two-step to that. People aren't realizing first off, the musicality of these guys feeling that and creating that. It's not just boo, ga, oh, ah, oh, ah. I mean, we're not going to take it as that.
Yeah.
But even
that has swing.
Yes. Yep. But you know what I mean. It has that gang. It's got that to it. But the point being, these guys were creating the same things that Buddy Holly was creating when they wrote a song.
Yeah.
So it's pretty,
and it's where they're coming from. Like AJ Pero and Filthy Animal Taylor were both influenced by big band music.
Yes.
That was where they came from. I actually got to do a record with AJ.
Wow.
And his pocket was so wide. I was like, is this in time? And I'm playing with John Reagan, one of the great bass players of all time. Rest in peace to both those brothers, by the way. And he's going, oh, yeah, it's right. You're wrong. I was like, got it. Okay, I got it. This is right. Like, he's going, this guy played with Frampton. He played with Robin Trower. If he's telling me it's right, it's right. And sure enough, it's this expansive sense of time that is just, it really does. It can be almost off-putting in that someone has so much freedom within the parameters of the bar line. Like, it's incredible, right? And once you start feeling that and you interpret that, you realize, and Alex Van Halen has that.
Same, yeah.
He's not going, oh, can you set, maybe let's get the click. I'll see. He's just going. Right. And Eddie's going. Eddie's eating a sandwich and he's tuning to whatever the hell he thinks is in tune. And Michael Anthony's just catching up and they go. Because the moment is happening. It's electric, right? You're capturing lightning in a bottle. Yeah,
well, and you think about AJ and his untimely passing, and then Twisted Sister is going to continue, and who do they get? They don't get like, I don't know, a Phil Rudd type of a drummer. They get Mike Portnoy.
I know.
Yeah. Well, hold on a second. Twisted Sister, who has all of this, you could count people on the side of the fucking road all day that probably don't like a Twisted Sister. And then the whole other side of the street is flipping those guys off going, we love Twisted Sister. Yeah. But the point is this, they get, a prog rock drummer who they know can play AJ's Pocket that you're describing as this godly, insane, attribute to music in general, and that style and that know-how and technique. Yeah. They get Mike Portnoy to come in and do just so the songs can feel like they did with AJ. And I just dropped the mic right here.
Yeah, man. No. Granted. That's perfect. And you nailed it. And you got to get a guy from, I think Mike's from Long Island too, right?
Yes.
I think you got to get somebody who just gets, because that Long Island thing is a thing. Having gone there, I was rehearsing with a band that was down there and meeting all those guys. Went, yep, they've got their own thing, and it's just a very unique culture. Take no bullshit. Call it like you see it, which I actually loved. I absolutely adored all the people I met from there. Makes sense, man.
Yeah, seems fast. Seems
it's like fast already.
They're fast. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're gonna go. They're gonna leave you behind if you're not careful.
That's right. They don't suffer fools.
With this being your second book now, what were some of the lessons learned from your first go around that you applied to this go around?
Well, you know what's funny? I actually did something different. I ended up writing a lot of the book before I interviewed anybody. I don't know that I do that again, but I just had so many feelings about it. This book ended up being a real cathartic book for me to write. Yeah. And it really spoke to a lot of insecurities I had about myself and that I didn't even realize. It was like this self-reflective thing. Insecurity, like a lot of people, I think I felt imposter syndrome. Like sometimes I felt I've had opportunities I didn't deserve. I don't deserve this. Some other guy should get this gig. Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why am I playing in an arena right now? I had all these things, which is interesting. It caused me to reflect. So going back and actually tracing who I was as a listener through my teenagers, I was like, oh, yeah, that's why I'm so defensive of this music. This is what helped me get through all that stuff. I actually had crushing self-doubt my whole life, but this music emboldened me and gave me purpose, and something inside me loved it so much I was willing to go past my own fears of my own ineptitude to go and try it, because I just had to be inside it. I had to be a part of it. And that's what that's why this book was different. It became something else. And then after, I had to go and interview people am I full of bullshit here? Like, I have to corroborate this. Did I make this up? And it was interesting to see a lot of times the things I felt were fortified, and sometimes they were challenged too. And in both cases, I was very happy because it helped me get a little closer to the truth of why I was actually doing this in the first place, why I was writing this book.
Give us an example of someone who challenged your notion of where you thought this was going.
I'll give you two. Rudy Sarzo was one, and Rick Emmett for similar reasons. With Rudy, I was talking about the Mental Health album like it's an 80s record, because to me, it was the first to market pop metal record, really. I mean,
Amen.
number one in the charts. And he's going, nah, man, it's a 70s record. Like Frankie and I are from the 70s. So when Frankie Benali and I, because I was talking about some of the shots, the way you orchestrated that. And he goes, wasn't orchestrated. I just know that Frankie in the third verse goes, bum, 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 bum. I know Frankie does this thing in the third verse, and we don't have to think about it because we played top 40 and disco gigs, and he just knew the way he played. And they recorded that album at Pasha Studios, a jingle house that just happened to have these PCM mics up on the wall that created this reflective sound that we've come to know as this kind of definitive 80s drum sound. So it was really just environment, 70s approach. The difference being you had Spencer Proffer producing, and he has this vision for participatory rock and has the song in mind. It's going to be Come On Feel the Noise by Slade. I just got to find some band who'll sing it, someone who can sing like Noddy Holder. Well, there's Dubrow playing around the bars. Hey, I'll give you a shot. You sing this song for me. We'll do a couple of years. I'll give you a production deal. And I'm just going, wow, okay. So I'm looking at it from the 80s perspective, but really I had to go back further. And Rick Emmett did the same thing, because I was talking with Rick and we had a great long conversation. And Rick goes, by that point, Triumph has already had a career.
Yeah.
So we're not thinking like an 8 bit. Like my references are Genesis and Gentle Giant and Yes and folk music and classical music. And so he goes, you're listening to, Thunder 7 and Spellbound. Yeah. But really by that point, I'm already yearning to do something very different, right? So he's not looking at those bands. I had them as contemporaries, like the US Festival. You're a contemporary of Motley Crue. You're a contemporary of Scorpions. And he's going, well, I think I'm kind of a contemporary of Rush, and I'm a contemporary of, these other bands. I want to be a contemporary of Led Zeppelin. So it was just interesting to see, to look at it from a different prism, right? To see that maybe some of the things that I love about the sounds of those records weren't things that they loved doing. Like Rudy said at one point, he said the 80s, for him, a lot of times, the cereal box became more important than what was in the cereal box and the cereal itself. And I was like, oh, how can you say that about Whitesnake? But his Whitesnake was the 70s Whitesnake. Like he liked that one better, and he wasn't in that one.
Right.
And I'm going, what? How could that be? So there was a couple of moments like that where it was interesting to see, because like Rudy said, he goes, I was there before rock and roll was there. I was born before rock and roll. So I'm like, okay. And John Reagan, same thing, he did what the hair metal thing with Fraley's Comet, but Ace had been through Kiss. He'd been through Frampton. These are guys just trying to get a commercial foothold. They're just trying to get a job, but they're 70s. It's a 60s, 70s approach. And they're fighting against what they feel are constrictions, because they came up in an era where it really was free. It really was all about the music, because formats weren't really formats yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love that.
The guys in Rush talk like that too, just in interviews and in their movies, documentaries and stuff. They talk like that too. Exactly what you're saying. Their contemporaries were a little bit more of a prog rock side of things, but eventually had to fit what the machine was asking them to do, or it was shit or get off the pot, kind of, which is a familiar thing until by the time, in more recent times, I won't put in a year on it. The labels it's more like real estate. Let's regentrify this. Okay, we need this part for a 7-Eleven. We need a Starbucks over here, and we need it. Let's see what makes the most money. It becomes cookie cutter at some point. And Rush wasn't having any of that, so they wrote 2112. When the label wanted them to sound like Bad Company or something, which is what was hot at the time. I get it. Yeah. But they were like more like Middle Finger. And then by Moving Pictures, they had like, we got you because we figured out how to straddle the line. We can do, more of a pop sensibility, but we're still a prog metal band, kind of, because they kind of invented it, And
I've always been envious of that type of conviction, right? Where
Sure.
it's not clouded. Like, what is it like to love music that much where the golden opportunities are in your hand and you jeopardize all because you actually can't live with yourself if you don't do it that way. Like Neil Peart, I'll go work on the farm. I don't care. I'm not doing that. I can't pretend a stranger's a long way to friend. I'm going to do it my way. I have to.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and to have that strength and the belief where at least they'll know, like, I love that story.
Yeah,
It's
me
wonderful.
too. But the thing is, they fucking did it.
I know they did it anyway.
They figured out their own way to appease the assholes who were wanted them to just like completely change their whole way they did shit. It's like, we're not doing that. So F up you, and here's the Temples of Syrinx, and I'm going to sing even higher, and we're going to play even faster, and we're going to have explosions and shit. You got find me one Bad Company record that does that.
Yeah.
Find me one Bad Company song that's 9 minutes long. You can't. So I don't know. It wasn't like they were harping on Bad Company, and neither am I. I love Bad, but the point is the point.
Yeah.
Tom Sawyer at a concert today is being played right after Highway to Hell, or right after, for whatever, anything that's contemporary. I'll say it, hair metal. Tom Sawyer is right there with it. Is Rush a hair metal band?
Right. See,
you see where I'm going with it? Somebody who's just writing on a box, throw the hair metal records in there. Are they throwing Rush in there?
I hope not.
What the fuck? Are they throwing Led Zeppelin in there? Oh my God, I just sinned by even putting those in the same sentence.
Yeah. Well, they're another case like Van Halen, right? Where it's template stuff, you know?
Yeah.
You got the dark, occult-based guitar player. You got the gorgeous lead singer who can sing in the stratosphere.
Shit, it sounds like we're talking about night songs again.
There you go. Well, that's it. Maybe we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Full circle, man.
I love that you mentioned Rick Emmett in this conversation, because I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and Triumph had an early foothold in San Antonio before they had a foothold in most other places in North America, or the United States, I should say. So Triumph is a band that San Antonio holds very near and dear. And I find it interesting that you mention them in this conversation, because much like Rick Emmett, I always think of them as a 70s band, because I heard them on the radio when they had albums like Just a Game and Rock and Roll Machine. And I remember when Never Surrender and Thunder 7 and that stuff came out, they were great records, but they were definitely of the time. And much like Rick said to you, he'd already had a career up to that point. So I find that's really interesting, that they can sort of be identified as an 80s band. And I think you nailed it on the head. Their appearance at the US Festival alongside Motley Crue, Quiet Riot. But, Judas Priest and Scorpions were there, and they were 70s bands, but they were peaking in the 80s, I guess. So it's easy to see why Triumph could possibly be considered an 80s band, even though they had so much behind them at that point.
I think it was just because I received them through video, right? Like, that's where I came to know Triumph. It was Follow Your Heart, and it was Sport of Kings after that, It was like they were a video band that I saw as contemporaries of Motley Crue.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw the videos with the light, and, Triumph were pioneers of the lighting and the arena rock thing, right? So they had similar rigs and the ramps and, the big drum sets and the pyro. And so they were kind of embracing that kind of spectacle too, which was being embraced by the newer generation of bands. So it felt like they were contemporaries, whereas Rick saw it as something different and saw motivations and inspirations different, and rightfully so, right? Like, I mean, I was like, oh, okay. So that was illuminating. By the way, the guitar player, who's your Paul? Is it Paul Liddell, your guitarist in Dirty Looks?
Yeah.
He likes Rick Emmett. I saw that guitar he was playing. He's got a Flying V.
Yeah.
That's gotta be a Rick thing.
Well, I don't know so much, but I'm sure he's a Triumph fan and as well as a Rick fan. Now here's the story about that old white. It's an OG. That's an original. That's old.
I saw it on the cruise. I was drooling. I was like,
that white Flying V, that old Dean white Flying V. That's the actual guitar that he tracked all of the guitars on Cool from the Wire album with.
Wow.
So it's a historical. It's kind of a talisman to the revamped Dirty Looks. Is that he has to play that guitar because it's, the OG group with Henrik Ostergaard was in the studio with that same guitar. So when it's on the stage with us, it's kind of like the talisman, right? The talisman.
Yeah. Well,
I'm glad that you noticed that. It's very Rick Emmett. Yes, it is.
Loved it. And by the way, you were amazing with them. So much so that after I watched you guys on the pool stage, when I got home, I started deep diving again in the catalog. And really, it's taken on a whole new meaning for me. Like, I realized how ahead of the time that was. There was some really incredible stuff on there. So thanks for that. I deep dove in the catalog after.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were sort of hoping for, the legacy that, of the songs that Henrik Ostergaard wrote with Paul and Jack and even Gene. So, just in the room with those guys, is like I was saying. But there was only one Henrik Ostergaard. That guy was just a motherfucker. Yeah. I mean, no one sounds like that or plays like that. He would just bled that shit. Another thing, this is kind of an interesting sort of like full circle, that Paul has been in Dangerous Toys since the early 90s. As Max Norman produced Cool from the Wire, we heard Cool from the Wire on the radio station that Metal Dave here grew up listening to. At a Toys gig, we heard Oh Ruby on the radio. Come to find that it was Max Norman who produced that. This is pre-Toys being taken serious. 6 months later, we get a deal. Couple months later after that, we're in the studio with Max Norman. Who produced a song, I don't know, you may have heard it, it's called Crazy Train.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
A little ditty.
Sorry, but to sidetrack, but it's interesting and full circle. Now, that's really, really good. Dirty Looks, is that a hair metal band?
There you go. See,
it's funny if you looked at the logo and you looked at the close up of the face on there, which I think is Henrik, right? Yeah. You could see that they were trying to make it commercially compatible, but to me, I'm hearing the darker side of Cheap Trick, AC/DC, like it. Yeah, it's got this dark melodic.
Do you hear Accept? Because I hear
Accept. Totally. Yeah, that they're definitely the Teutonic thing happening in there too. The opposite.
But even Cool from the that's Accept, dude.
Totally.
So a lot of people miss that, and they just see, glammy lyrics and they did have a bunch of hair and they're dancing around in the video, whatever. That's a trend that we follow, or it's just how you dance to your own music.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that it's going to end up in a box called hair metal in my house.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I put Dirty Looks in the same category as Dangerous Toys, Junkyard. Yeah. We mentioned Tesla earlier.
Yeah.
The bands that are from that era but didn't really subscribe to the image of the era.
Right. Like where would you put Raging Slab and Circus of Power? You know what I mean?
That was alternative before there was alternative.
That's right. Yeah. Where were those motherfuckers going to go at a Poison party? You know what I mean? They say, we need to leave. We're not allowed in this party. What the fuck?
Yeah, that East Coast thing. It was I remember thinking it was distinctly New York. There was something distinctly New York about. I don't know if where Raging Slab was from, but I think
they were from New York. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt New York to me. There's a band called Smash Gladys.
They were wearing Raging Slab were wearing cowboy hats. They look like Leonard Skinner. That's
right.
fringe jackets.
They had this cool chick playing slide guitar on a Bo Diddley on every song. I was like, that's like Rose Tattoo living on a farm,
Right.
writing heavy metal songs or something.
Yeah.
Little trivia here on the subject of Raging Slab and that chick, and you might know this, Jason, and Sean, you might know this as well. Do you know that they are the models on the cover of the UFO album, Force It? Is it Force It, where there's a bathroom scene?
Yeah. What?
Raging Slab.
Hold on a second. What do you mean Raging Slab is
Like when they're in the bathtub making out, the guy with the pony?
The couple
Yes.
that's
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
I need some fact check. Hey, you
Somebody
out in the
fact
truck,
check.
are you getting this? I need you to look that up for me. Yeah.
Look it up. There's a UFO connection with.
Yeah, can
with
you check
Raging
that
Slab.
for me? Because I think Gabe's full of shit. Yeah, thanks.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Wow. Well, that was in the 70s. How were they 15?
Oh, I don't know that, but I did read somewhere that they were the models, the cover models for that record.
Well, Force It, you mean the couple that's in the singer and the guitar player? Okay.
I don't know if it's the couple in the band. One, if not both of the people on that album cover are from Raging Slab.
That's crazy because that's an English. I don't know if it is or not because. Wow, I have
It's
to
a
look that up.
Hypnosis album cover.
Yeah, it would have
it's
been a Hypnosis album.
Yeah, it is Hypnosis. Are they in England or are they in New York?
I think they're English, aren't they?
I think so too. So were they flying the models from
Hypnosis.
New York over to England to do the cover, or did they just shoot the photo and do some,
I have no idea how the connection was made, but I'm pretty certain.
You just derailed my brain. Wow.
When we get done today, Google it. So, Sean, I was going to ask you, kind of like my previous question, was there anyone that you interviewed for the book that really took a defensive stance about hair metal and was like, thank God you're writing this book. I got to get something off my chest. It's about time somebody set the record straight. Was there anybody in that camp?
I'm trying to think. I don't think so. I think, you know what? I think Dee Snider might have intimated that to me. I don't know if it made it into the book. I know Jason and I talked about, that with the music we value and the value we put on music. But it was funny. I think by that point, by the time I got to the line of question, I was more interested in artistic intention and the music side of things. I was less about the defense of it. Maybe talking to Ricky Rocket, maybe Ricky kind of said, hey, thanks for acknowledging that we actually like music, and he said, look, none of us are virtuosi, that's not what we do, but we love Stars, we love Cheap Trick, we love rock and roll, we listen to music, we're fans,
Yeah, of course.
It comes from the heart. It's just, we also like putting on a show, that's what we do, it's authentically us. So I think a few people might have mentioned it was nice to talk about something other than just the image and the sex and the drug. I didn't get into that because who cares? I know lawyers who have more sex and drugs than the rock and roll musician friends I have. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
that's
football players. Oh
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Jace, but for me now, it's weird if I'm at a gig and I see someone doing something. I kind of everyone else is just kind of being normal people, and then someone doing something weird. It's oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That still happens.
You feel compelled to do that in front of human beings.
I walk out and laugh at them. I'm going, what the fuck are they doing? Yeah. Hey, dude, can you tug on their shirt? Hey, you're not 17 anymore. This is not what you're.
This is not what's happening here.
But they had their own dad. I don't need to be their dad.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? Do what you want. But I just find it odd when people think that this is happening on a regular basis. It's my kids got soccer tomorrow morning. I'm catching the 4 a.m. flight. But let's party all night.
Yeah, sure. But before I forget, in the Metal Gears, the Decline of the Western Penelope Spheris movie, everybody knows what I'm talking about. they're interviewing Lemmy. You know, he's sitting up on the hill. The Hollywood lights are behind him. The scene is iconic when you think about it now, especially that we lost Lemmy. But the point, they're asking him questions, and I think they bring up Poison. And he like, what do you think about, you know, the glam and the makeup and the hair and the da-da-da? And he doesn't snipe at them at all. He calmly takes a drag and he goes, hey, more power to him, man. I wish I could pull that off. I just, that's not me. But he gave them a pass. He didn't say, F you, that's all wrong. That has nothing to do with what's coming out of the speakers. Fuck you. He didn't, no.
Yeah. In fact, I think
That
that same scene, I think, is where he says, is that the one where he says the famous line, run it up the flagpole and see who salutes? Or is that
maybe it sounds right. Maybe.
And oddly enough, many years later, CeCe DeVille played a solo on a Motorhead record.
I love that.
So there you go.
And you know, guys, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, you mentioned the decline of Western civilization. We all know the famous Chris Holmes scene, you know.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, one of the most poignant moments of that cruise we just did was getting to spend some time with Chris.
Wow.
Because he watched our set and he came over and he's like, oh, I'm a guitar player. I'm going, yeah, I know you're a guitar player. I know. But the innocence and love of music and talking about tone, and I know where Chris Holmes comes from. Like, he is coming from like childhood friends with Eddie Van Halen, like growing up in that scene. And George Lynch was just about to play with Lynch Mob, and he goes, come on, man, let's go watch George play. He's playing great. And like, this is not the guy we saw in Decline of Western Civilization.
No.
This is a sensitive, articulate, music-loving person who is really happy to be there, taking pride in his performance. Like, it was just so good. That's one guy, Dave, to answer a previous question. I would have loved to have talked to him and reach out, because when we started talking and I went back and listened, I can hear now. I go, yeah, man, I can hear where you came from, Eddie Van, where you guys were all listening to the same guys and getting inspired. And it just kind of went in a different, more theatrical way for you. But I was just so impressed with that. And also how during his set, he said, I know that you guys all know me from the Decline of Western Civilization. Please don't think that that's a way to be. Just enjoy music and be cool. You know, like where he felt a responsibility, like, because people would be like, yeah, man, let's party. He's going, no, don't do that.
Wow,
you know,
yeah.
Like he felt some sense of responsibility for people's well-being. I just thought the guy came across as such a classy and wonderful guy. So,
wow.
Well, he's kind of saving some face by being able to still have a vehicle in order to like set the record straight, just by even mentioning it. And it took 30 seconds for him to go, yeah, that shit is like, that is not me. I was in a weird place. Let's celebrate life. Not the opposite.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I thought so too.
Cool.
There was a few things in the book that were more observations on my part that I wanted to bring up because I thought they were so cool. You mentioned growing up, and two very distinctive musical memories for you was hearing Joan Jett, I Love Rock and Roll. And the other one that I really got a kick out of, because I remember when I heard this song, it blew me away, and very few people remember it or knew it in the first place, and that's Laura Branigan.
Yeah, Gloria.
Tell me about Branigan and that moment, and why that was still, all these years later, it made such an impression. You just put it in your brand new book.
It made, you know what? It was my first taste of music-based adrenaline, because I had an older sister. She liked Kiss. She liked the music that was happening, but I was into hockey. I was into superheroes. I was too young to grasp what was happening. It just seemed kind of like this other thing. Like, music was just something that happened around me. My mom playing a piano. Like, it didn't connect with me. But when I heard Gloria, everything came alive inside me. Like, why do I need to hear this again? And it wasn't like you can just go on Spotify, right? You hear it and the magic's gone, and you got to wait 4 hours till it comes back on the radio again, on the one radio station in town. And I remember there was something spicy on that cassette that I wasn't allowed to have it. There was might have been, I don't know, something my parents didn't like it. You're not getting that. And I was like, okay. So I couldn't have the cassette, but I loved that song so much, and it just made me feel so good. And I remember it's my first connection with an electric guitar sound. Da da da. It's just this one little power chord riff that only comes in like 3 times in the song, but I would wait for it, and I'd be like bracing myself. Okay, it's coming. Oh, it was great. I wish it lasted longer, and I'd have to wait for it. So I loved that song. And then I got the lightning struck again with Joan Jett, I Love Rock and Roll. And yeah, man, I don't know. Those songs just did it for me. And then you can amplify that by 100 by the time I'm getting into Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, and Def Leppard. Then all these things I loved in those songs are bigger, brighter, and just more electric for me.
I just loved that you mentioned Laura Branigan, because I remember that song, and I kind of had sort of the same take on it. It was like, man, this chick's got a great voice, and the song was just, it was so catchy, but her voice, there was some kind of quality to it, some rasp or something about her voice that I just thought was really, really cool. And you didn't hear a lot of, at least I didn't hear a lot of women singing rock and roll on the radio back then.
I got one for you, Darby Mills.
Oh yeah,
I got you. Darby Mills has a voice.
Oh man,
yeah.
Does she ever?
And it's like Kim Carnes, Betty Davis size. It has that thing. And when I hear that in a woman's rock voice, when it turns into that, I cannot get it out of my. It's like Janis Joplin. I want my tone to be careful what you wish for, because once you get that tone, you know, okay, here's a big bag of money, Jason. We want you to sing this, jingle on a truck commercial, and I'm trying to clean up my voice and sound pretty on this jingle to take home the bag of money. Yeah, we'll give you a call if we use it. You only win the bag of money if you, and see what I'm saying. But when I heard those ladies dig into that, it was So you're on something about Gloria and like where she's digging in.
Yeah. Another observation in the book that I thought was really interesting is I had no idea that Thomas Dolby is on Foreigner 4.
I didn't know
that.
He was Mutt Lange's keyboard guy. Like Thomas was like, kind of first to market with all those skills to program all those new synthesizers and the Fairlights. And so he was a programmer. He's on Pyromania too, right? Like he's in there adding all those keys and stuff.
So he's Mutt Lange's guy.
Yeah, like Mutt knew him, and I'm not sure how they met, but he was someone who he could call upon to have the latest sounds, have it programmed, to teach sometimes reticent keyboard players. They're like, no, I'm going to play B3 on this. No, actually, you're not. You're going to be playing this thing. And, or you're not playing Fender Rhodes on this. We're playing these sounds. And drummer, if you want to be on the album, here's a manual. Go learn how to program this thing. This is going to be the Fairlight. Yeah.
When I read that, I was so surprised, and I had no reason to doubt you, but I literally went and got my Foreigner 4 record out of my collection over here, and I looked on the back, and sure enough, there's Mr. She Blinded Me with Science, Thomas Dolby, credited on Foreigner 4. I thought that was great. I love finding these little gems when I read a book, and there was a few of them in your book. The other thing, speaking of Pyromania, is you made a point that I would have never considered, but you're dead on when you're talking about the song Photograph. When it gets to the chorus, where most songs, that's the big buildup of the power chords, Photograph, it all drops out and it turns into a delicate guitar picking thing behind the vocal. And I thought about it and I was like, wow, I would have never given that any thought, but you're absolutely right. It's the opposite of what you're expecting in the chorus.
Isn't that crazy?
I think Foolin' does that too. Foolin' kind of Foolin', ga ga.
Yeah.
It's this it adds space, and your ears are waiting for that ga ga. Well, that's adding space, just like Highway to Hell and Back in Black have all that space in it. I think that's a mutt. Yeah,
It's a mutt thing.
Must be a mutt thing. Yeah.
Well,
And-
as well, AC/DC is one of those bands that, you know, you know, the space, the notes you're not playing are as important as the notes you're playing. Notes you're not playing can be more powerful than the notes you're playing, and they've did that long before Mutt. But what a great producer by way of being able to take that and utilize it in making a hard rock, heavier ilk of song and having it chart.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah.
What I loved about Mutt too, like, you know, especially in those days, was like the ability. It's like a chef going and picking out the ingredients. Like, you know, with Def Leppard, I was lucky enough. I did some dates opening up with them on bandos, and I anytime I have a chance to talk to people, I pick their brains. Right, I'm just going after everybody and ask them questions. But they were very, very to the man willing to talk about this, and they said the same thing. We were open vessels for him, but we were included and valued. So he knew, he'd already honed in on what each guy brings to the table, and you all do the work. They did the work. They're generating ideas. He's in there generating ideas too. But what he's doing is pulling the best out of every person to create the thing. But it is generated. It's not going out and calling Steve Lukather and all the session guys. It's this group will make this thing, and we will spend as long as it takes to make it the way I hear it.
Yeah.
Because I know I want Joe Elliott's flavor on this. I know I want Phil Collin doing this solo. I know Steve's going to do this. I know Rick's going to program, but we're going to do this together. Your voice will be there, but it will be seen through that. And his genius and their willingness, the willingness of the genius in Def Leppard, the band, is their willingness to accept the information and process it and come to the table and challenge themselves. It's work ethic. And Vivian Campbell said the same thing. He goes, Def Leppard is about work ethic, plain and simple. Work harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Vivian Campbell, who was in Sweet Savage, whom when Metallica first started, they used to cover his songs. Boom, fucking mic drop. Isn't that mind-blowing? Isn't that the craziest fucking thing? I saw a picture of Sweet Savage the other day, and they're in fucking Belfast, Ireland, wearing fucking spandex in like 1977. You know, it's like a 45 cover, and I'm like, holy diver, bitch.
Yeah.
Holy diver, motherfucker. Metallica influenced Metallica, you know. And now he's in Def Leppard. He's hey, oi, mate. How's it going? You know, whatever. It's fucking crazy, man. It's just crazy.
Pretty crazy trajectory.
I'm going to blow your mind. I got to disappear for a second. I'm right here.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't like holding stuff up to the camera. That's Vivian Campbell's autograph.
Whoa.
On a scalloped neck kit Stratocaster. Look, different color of
that's so cool
there. Yeah, Vivian Campbell. I inherited this from my friend Eric Pauley, who's no longer with us. And I don't know the backstory really, but Vivian Campbell's autograph on this Strat that actually plays quite well.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
So I wanted to ask you,
but I always say Vivian Campbell from Sweet Savage, and people are like, what?
Yeah. I always say Vivian Campbell from Dio, but yeah,
it works.
I wanted to ask you one more question about the book, because this chapter or these paragraphs or whatever it was, whatever it amounted to, was great. And this is the story where you are auditioning for Dee Snider's Christmas production, and you obviously a Dee Snider fan, a little nervous and intimidated about the audition, to say the least. You get the audition, they make you shave your back or something like that.
My arms.
Your arms. Okay.
Dee Snider's wife has shaved my arms with an electric razor. This is true.
Recap that story for us real quick.
Talk about Long Island. Here's Long Island. So I've got the gig and I'm acting in this, right? Like it's not just playing. Like I got to speak, I got to sing, I got to dance. We got a Broadway choreographer. Like,
wow.
Yeah, it was a thing. But she goes, "Get that shit off there. You can't have that's not rock and roll. Give me a razor." They gave a razor to me. And she goes, "There, now it's rock and roll." Because she designed all the Twisted Sister outfits. That's Suzette.
Yeah.
Designed it. And she is a brilliant woman. I love her. She is hardworking, absolutely fiercely intelligent, amazing woman. But she lets you know, hey, you put on a few pounds since the first audition. You got to fit these pants now. And people are like, "Oh, you can't say that to the actors." She's like, "Hell, I can." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I want to fit in my spandex.
Yeah, let it rip.
No problem. I'm with you, Miss Snider."
Yeah.
And I just know she was amazing. So that was one of it. But yeah, the whole audition thing, I got that gig because I was playing in a band called 4 by Fate with Todd Howarth and John Reagan from Fraley's Comet, Stet Howland. And we were managed by Danny Stanton, who is Dee Snider's agent. Long story short, I see Dee's coming to town and I'm going, "Oh, it's a musical. Maybe I can get a job playing guitar in the band." I said, "Danny, can you get me an audition?" He goes, "Oh yeah, man. No, let me see what I can do." And sure enough, he comes through at the audition and I said, "Yeah, okay, man. So the audition's here, and I'm going, "Okay, cool." And he goes, "Yeah, so we'll send the script over." And I go, "The script? What do you mean?" "Well, yeah, you got to act in it." I go, "What?" So they send over the script and it's not just a little bit. Like I'm acting. I'm one of the 4 main guys acting in the play. And I go, "Oh, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? I don't know what I'm doing." So I kind of learned some lines. And I remember I had a gig with a Canadian band called Rough Trade, and we were playing a festival gig. So I played the gig, and it was 6 hours away. I drove home, and I was pretty tired. That helped. I was tired, so I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to do the best I can. I had to work the night before. But I remember, if you think musicians are cutthroat, man, sit with a bunch of actors going for a gig. "So what have you been in recently?" "I've done this and this." And I'm going, "Oh, I think I saw you when we were rocking. Oh, I saw you." And they're just psyching me out, right? Like I said, "Okay, I'm not getting this." But you had to play guitar to get the gig. And I could hear them playing. I went, "That ain't Eddie Ojeda and that ain't JJ French in there." So I think I might have a shot at one of this anyway. So that kind of bolstered my confidence, right? So I went in and read some lines at first, and I could just see the blank faces, like, okay, go play. But the music director at the time was Doug Katsoris, and Doug played on Paul Stanley solo albums. Like I knew who he was. He played on, I think he played on Runaway by Bon Jovi. Like he was a heavy New York cat, right? Keyboard player.
Keyboard, all right.
Yeah, so he's the music guy. And so I go, okay, at least there's a muso here. I know what you're about. Just we're the same creature. So, like that made me feel good. And he goes, "Can you read a chart?" And I went, "Yeah, I can. Okay. So we played and I sang a bit and they kind of got the idea. It's like, "Oh, okay. You do this and you know how to move. I don't have to teach you about rock and roll stuff." So they said, "Okay." Well, after I played, they said, "Okay, I'm sending an acting coach to your house tonight. Learn how to act. Dee's coming tomorrow." I said, "No problem." But fortunately, they sent this acting coach to my house who was amazing. And he said, "Look, dude, plant your feet, speak at the speed of conversation." Best thing I ever heard. Like instead of trying to be an actor, you just talk. Yeah. And that really helped. And he kind of gave me some pointers. And long story short, Dee Snider, I got the plate. We're not going to take it for Dee Snider. And he came up and he said, "You rose to the occasion." And it was the greatest moment of my life. Like your hero telling you that. So
nice.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't finish up on the book without having you retell that story, because I could feel the excitement reading it off the page. It's like, oh man, I could feel the pressure.
And his wife took a razor to you.
Yeah, man. At least it was my arms, not my throat.
Right.
No, it was amazing. It was incredible.
Wow.
So you've done 2 books now. What would be the topic of your 3rd book if you were going to, or do you have something in mind?
I got a scoop for you guys. I
All
just
right.
signed a deal for the 3rd book. So it's going to be Battle Axes, a hard rock and history of the pointy guitar.
Oh,
I like it.
I love it.
And the idea being, I don't know if that's going to be the title. That's what we're working on right now. But the idea being, I'm obsessed with guitars that are pointy or off shape. Why does it generate this feeling of excitement in me? And what is it like for players who have these identifiable guitars? Like, why did Chris Holmes feel the need to have a guitar like that, to have those Charvel stars? Why did Eddie tape up his? Why did Randy have, the offset flying V? And it's really, I think I want to do a little bit of a history about pointing guitars, because there's controversy there too. I remember when I got the gig with Nelly Furtado, I had an endorsement with BC Rich. And I remember showing up and the music director going, all right, I know you're in Helix, but you can't play guitar on stage. We're playing Latin pop right now. We use Gibson or whatever it was. And, I was like, okay. And now it wouldn't have mattered, but, you got to play what's right for the gig. So there's definitely strong feelings about, those guitars in the way that there's strong feelings about music genres. So a little bit of a history of that, and I think that there's, but really I want to find out about what excites people about the instruments they play, and what's that connection beyond the playability. Like I think you said it best today, Jason, the talismanic qualities of an instrument and what that represents. Like, that's an amazing story that represents power, the power of that band, the spirit of that band.
It's part of the history, belongs in a fucking museum, if you ask me.
Yeah.
It's the lore of a band or an artist or something like that. Speaking of that, and Canadian rock and metal, and your scoop on your new book about battle axes, i.e. pointed guitars, choice, whatever, because they look like the guitars that Piggy from Voivod used to make.
Yes.
Those were crazy, like jagged. They look like he was just gluing razor blades together and then tracing it out. And it was just this like,
yeah.
And it was probably reminiscent of, and maybe even Piggy could have been helped by Away, the drummer, Michelle, the idea of what guitar says Voivod the best. Well, I've had the distinct opportunity to stand, this was in 1986, to stand over Piggy's shoulder, look at him change strings on one of those handmade guitars.
Wow.
Where does someone get a guitar like this? And he turns around and in broken English, he says, I make.
Wow. What a band. I make. Perfect.
Beyond over the top. A perfect band in my eyes.
Yeah.
Because there's no rules. They made the rules and we ride on our own highway, and they're still riding on their own fucking highway. But those guitars Piggy made, that's the first thing I thought of, is like, what makes that? Why does the band, I don't know, this sounds crazy when I even say it, before I even say it, to preempt it. Why does the band's, to sound that way, they have to have that guitar with all the points on it to sound that way.
I think it's like purity of intention. Like they're in Jonquière, Quebec, right? Northern Quebec, a couple of albums between them. I remember I interviewed Michelle for my first book.
Wow.
And I play in a band now called Coney Hatch, a Canadian hard rock.
Yeah.
And,
dude, hold on a second. Time out. So Helix, Coney Hatch, Aaron, you're in all of the like classic like, dude, I'll use it again. Talisman, like lore of Canadian metal and hard rock. You're like this. You're the peacemaker. You're the Band-Aid. You're the heavenly creature who's like keeping this alive. I just fucking love it. I'm sorry I just had to tell you that.
I'm so lucky. I just show up, and I guess eventually they let me in. I don't know.
Wow. And I'm working with a guy out of Jersey, Jack Frost. I don't know if you know.
I know Jack. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm
writing songs. He's in fucking Aldo Nova.
I know, dude. I just was talking to someone.
He took your gig. He took your.
I should be in Aldo Nova. I thought I was. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you're playing with every other Canadian rock band. You know, next thing you know, you're going to whip out Sign of the Gypsy Queen.
Oh, I got the call, man. I got a call.
Oh my God.
Here's my April Wine story.
Dude, April Wine's on the cruise coming up.
I know. I want to get back on there.
Yeah.
But I got a call to play bass with them from their tour. I just gotten off the road with Gilby Clark playing bass, and I got a call because their tour manager was from my hometown, Steph, and he goes, "Hey man, our bass player is gone. He's playing with Celine Dion now, and I need. Can you learn this? I'm in." So he sends me the set, sends me all the stuff. Okay, man, here are the dates, big string of dates. I'm going, and then Miles Goodwin phones me. He goes, "Hey, you're a guitar player." And I go, "Yeah, but I play bass." He goes, "Let me stop you right there. I play bass too if someone puts a gun to my head. I'm too old to take a new band promo shot. You'll be gone as soon as you get a guitar gig." And I went, "Yeah, probably." He goes, "Thanks for your time."
Yeah, okay.
I lost it.
Wow.
But you know what, man? He wasn't wrong. He like talking about a guy who's been through the ringer, right?
Yeah, you can't get mad about that.
So. Not at all. Not at all. I just thought it was so funny. I never gotten, earned, and lost a gig so fast in my life.
Well, speaking of all your gigs, and we don't have time to go into it all today, but just to recap, you know, you've played or play in Helix, Coney Hatch, Lee Aaron, the Metal Queen, pop star Nelly Furtado. But I know you and met you as the guy who fronted his own band called Crash Kelly. What is the status on Crash Kelly today? Guys, I can tell you with great joy that I just got the first mix back of some new Crash Kelly music that's going to be coming out, but it's a companion album for the book. So I'm going to be doing all these classic 80s covers, and I just did the first one, and I'm working. So I'm working on that right now. I'm working on a new record that's going to come out as a Crash Kelly record. And you know, I have such fond memories of us playing together, Broken Teeth and Crash Kelly in Los Angeles, and Jason was so kind and encouraging and complimentary. And I have to tell you what that meant to me as someone who was suffering from severe imposter syndrome at the time. Why do I have a record deal? Why am I in LA? This isn't to get that kind of feedback from someone you really admire and you looked up to, and you had the records and you listened to over and over again, was very, very. It was so important to my development. So, Jason, I want to thank you. I've thanked you for that, but I'll do it publicly. So, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I am very impulsive, and if I'm having a feeling, I'm sure that's where it was coming from. So it was genuine, and I was walking up to you to go, yeah, yes. So it was a genuine excitement for me to be able to tell you, whatever you said, I told you.
You know what, man? We were talking about touch. You talked the way you played. It was the way I played guitar, and like just you the way I touched. And I just said, wow, no one's ever said that to me or articulated that to me. And that just, you know, you take that with you then. Like that's something that you take with you and you're confident about, and you go and you bring into your other work. So thank you.
You're welcome.
You mentioned that this upcoming Crash Kelly album is basically cover tunes because it's a companion piece to your Don't Call It Hair Metal book.
Yeah.
Is there any plans in the future for another album of original material from Crash Kelly?
Yes. In fact, I have some songs that I wrote with a fellow named Mo Berg. I don't know if you're familiar with a band called The Pursuit of Happiness. Great Canadian. Listen, check them out. A fantastic Canadian power pop band. They were Guns N' Roses' favorite band back in the day. I know that. Gilby Clarke told me that. Yeah. So check them out. The Pursuit of Happiness. And so Mo and I wrote a few songs recently that I have there waiting to go. It's just, I've been busy with other things, but now is the time in my life after writing this book. I am feeling I feel like it's something I need to do. It's funny, today, I will tell you this. I was down in my studio and I'm singing I Want to Be Somebody by Wasp.
Oh.
And I was able to put myself into the place of my 14-year-old self and sing that. And it was an incredible experience. What a gift to have that song out there in the universe. What a gift it was back then to have something where it's like, I want to be somebody. It's true. Like, I do want to be somebody. Like this anthem, this rallying call for individuality, right? When you're feeling like you're just part of the wallpaper is pretty powerful. So this is something I'm doing that I just feel I have to do. I don't think I'm adding anything new to these songs. I'm certainly not the greatest singer in the world, but I feel I have to, and I realize it's really the culminating activity in this exercise. I always just wanted to get inside the music I loved. I wanted to be inside it. And now this allows me to do that. And I'm working with a very talented engineer, mixer, Frank Greiner, who he just sent me the mix. And it sounds like you dropped the needle. And it sounds like when I'm in my parents' basement in 1986. And
Perfect.
this is what I want.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's a few people out there in the world who want that too. But if there's not, I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, we want it here at the Talk Louder podcast. So
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah,
I was gonna play show and tell today, but I didn't prepare myself. I still have the Crash Kelly 3/4 sleeve raglan that you gave me at South by Southwest in 2005, and it's 3/4 sleeve like baseball jersey, so I can only wear it in the winter time, and here in Texas that means about 2 weeks out of February.
Right,
but I do still have it.
That's
I do
amazing,
still have
man.
it. Yeah. Now, I wanted to make sure that Crash Kelly was still active and still possibly doing something. I'm happy to hear that you are. Tell people where they can get your book. Don't Call It Hair Metal.
Anywhere you find books. I've been blessed with a really great publisher, ECW Press, a great distributor. So at all your, I forget what your big chain is. At Borders.
That's one of them.
That's one of them. Amazon, anywhere you find books. And you know what? I know you can get it in a lot of cool independent bookstores. So,
Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble is still around. Yeah.
Yeah.
People should.
Anywhere you get your books, you should be able to get it.
Well, it's a great book. So congratulations. I know I can imagine putting a book together is a lot of time and effort, especially when you interview people on top of just the writing that you would have done by yourself. So a job well done. Thank you for entertaining me with the pages. Thank you for sending it to me. I appreciate it, and I hope others will too. Don't Call It Hair Metal. On behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with our special guest today, Sean Kelly, on the Talk Louder podcast.